Stanislavski, the most influential acting teacher ever existed, wrote, "If you're looking for something, don't go sit on the seashore and expect it to come and find you. You must search, search, search with all the stubbornness in you." This searching, this finding, is what we're gonna do in the second episode of Digital Clay. This episode continues and completes the work we did in episode 1, so please go watch it in case you missed it. So in episode 1, we learned to feel the structure, to learn to feel the truth in our work. The second phase of sculpture in our process is called finding. So what is finding? What are we searching for? I could tell you that finding is digging for life in your work, for movement, for the original intention, for the original spark, for that magic that creates a powerful bridge with your viewer. Or more simply, is learning to complete our work, to complete our study, to complete our piece. And I'd like to start this episode by showing you a very good example of this process of completing a study, of completing a work. And we'll take a look very briefly at the work of a few masters, contemporary and past. So we're going to start by taking a look at the work of an Italian sculptor called Medardo Rosso. He was considered, together with Rodin, the father of Impressionist sculpture. Medardo Rosso was a master of finding the life within the sculpture, and you can see a few examples here. Okay, and I won't talk too much about these things, because if you have to explain too much art, it means that it's not working. But in my opinion, you can perceive the power and the beauty of human life through Medardo Rosso's sculpture. Look at this. So look at the economy. Look at the essence of these marks. Look at how light gives dignity to the sculptures. Okay, light is extremely important for sculpture. And now look at his contemporary. Let's take a quick look at Rodin, the master of Impressionist sculpture. Take a look at this. So when we say finding the gesture, finding the emotion, this is incredible. So you can almost feel the weight and you can almost feel the heaviness of this woman, the heaviness which she's dragging along, and she's exhausted. You know, you can feel her. Oh, look at this. It's a bit more subtle. But still, you can feel something, you can see something. So let's take a look at a few other contemporary sculptors. Greet Kittelers, I'm not sure if I pronounced it correctly. But take a look at his poses. Take a look at his actions. So we're not seeing an extremely sophisticated use of anatomy or use of accuracy in details. We don't see any of that in these poses. But we can feel something so powerful. And what we are seeing, what we're looking at, is art. So the second part of our sculpting process is so important, because it's when you're establishing a link between your piece and the viewer. Okay, so you're finding an action, you're finding a gesture, you're finding an objective that your character, that your figure, that your sculpture will tend to Look at Richard McDonald. This is another amazing contemporary sculptor. He made this incredible work with dynamic figures. So he sculpts them while he sees them dancing. He sees them performing and he sculpts them. There are a lot of very cool YouTube videos about him. You can have a look to have an insight about his process. It's really amazing. But take a look at something else. Take a look at this. Okay, it's another form of movement, more subtle, but it's so powerful. Take a look at this. The gesture here is not in an extreme action or in an extreme pose, but it's in the subtlety of the gaze and the gesture of the mouth, of the lips. Okay, take a look at this other wonderful figure. He's always Richard McDonald. He was sculpting, if I remember correctly, a dancer, a famous dancer named Acosta. Okay, and we can go on with other examples. Okay, look at this. Okay, look at this. Subtle actions, subtle gestures, but they are complete. What you do in the finding, what we do is we learn to complete a piece of sculpture. We learn to complete a study, and we learn to create art. We strive to create art, and when you try to communicate, when you try to create this bridge with your viewer, with your audience, then you're doing art. It doesn't really matter if it's perfect, if it's detailed, it's not detailed, it's raw, it's not polished. What we're focusing on is to feel something and find it, okay? So learn to internalize these amazing structures. Learn to internalize the amazing truth of the human figure, okay? You're sculpting or... Look at this. This is another fantastic sculptor. His name is Clay Enoch. Look at the action. So the action brings through everything else. So it keeps alive. You don't need a particularly sophisticated detailing work. You could need that, but it's simply a tool. So anatomy and detail work simply becomes a tool which serves the main action. Take a look at this. Now this is fantastic. I find it. This is a different type of finding. This is different type of gesture of action. Okay, this is somehow contracted upon itself, and this shows. And this is something you can particularly play with within sculpture. These contrasting forces between the clay and between the forming of something and the actual refining of the shape. Take a look at this. I find this fantastic, And to be honest, I don't know if this is a finished piece or it's just a study, but it's wonderful, It's amazing. These lines within the eyes, across the mouth, okay? They complement the initial spark of your sculpture. Okay? And what we want to do now is go back to our work. But it's very important to understand that every different study that you do, every different exercise or work that you do is going to suggest you something, okay? And you want to train your artistic instinct to find that spark and go along with it, okay? And right now, I just want to refine a bit more the shapes, okay? And I'm not using symmetry anymore, okay? So now we're entering into more interesting territory, more imperfect, okay? So now the inner artist is scared to death. You say, oh no, I want to get it right. I want to make it perfect. I don't want to mess it up. You know, what's going to happen? And that's cool. You want to learn to dance with this kind of fear as an artist. You know, nothing you do is perfect. Nothing you do is perfect. But whatever you do in sculpture is an attempt at finding truth. It is not perfect. It's an attempt at finding truth. So let's start to just feel out. Okay, I want to feel out. And what we want to do now is we want to create a bit of a sense, an organic sense. We want to create, we want to start. So you remember that in the first lesson, we found all these shapes and we were pretty bold into squaring out the shapes because we wanted to learn them, we wanted to feel them. And now we need to feel the subtlety of the human skin, which is on top. We need to feel what's happening. And we need to feel how the skin wraps around. Okay, we don't want to go overboard. I am not trying to create a realistic representation of a human head in this moment. And what I mean with this is that we're not using a reference, okay? But we want to continue, but we want to learn how to complement what we did in the first study, okay? So once you have these squared and strong shapes, okay, now you can go on and you can put your skin on top, okay? And the skin, you don't want it to be perfect, okay? So I got this ball stylus brush and we can start to be a bit, you know, a bit imperfect like this, because we want to, at the same time, we want to conserve all those interesting details and shapes we found. Okay, so I don't want to lose that initial spark. I don't want to lose that initial spark that we found in episode 1. Don't want to lose it. It's already there. Okay, we already found something in episode 1. When you find something, you need to learn to hone it. Okay, don't go crazy with it. It's not the purpose of our studies. We're just concerned with two things. First one is to feeling the structure. The second one is to finding a gesture, an intention, and trying to represent it. So we'll just balance what I did on the right side. Okay, we'll just balance it out here on the left side. Maybe you just want to fill in a little bit the area between the mandibular structure and the zygomatic. Okay, maybe focus on that. That is how you would go on if you were to build a complete realistic portrait. Okay, try and maybe have something a bit more organic in this area. Okay, so what we're doing, we're covering trying to complement all the structure that we played it in episode 1. Okay, so we want to hone it, so we want to respect the structure we find, we want to complement it. Okay, what this could mean in a very vulgar way is that we could just simply go over all these ideas with our brush, you know. But the truth is, we like what we did in our first study, and we don't want to go crazy with that. We want to keep our understanding of these main shapes. And also gotta be careful if you fill out too much these things. Now take a look at what I'm doing. I'm using this interesting fracture brush. This is a default brush that you will find in Zbrush, and you will find it actually by pressing comma, going into the brush folder and double clicking into the clay folder. And this guy, fracture, is what we're using. And I find it very cool because it creates some very interesting clay-like structure, clay-like texture. And then you can go in with a trim dynamic or with a clay trim and simply smooth it out a little bit. So now that's what we want to do. Okay, so now we want to get our trim. Okay, so we're learning basically how to finish a piece, how to finish a study. So this is what in traditional sculpture would be called texturing. Okay, creating a texture. And in our case, we're trying to recreate a bit of that aliveness of the material. Okay, so I'm using trim here. Okay, and if we find more stuff, then fantastic. If we find more interesting feature, then we try and get those. Okay, so I'm trying to use the trim in those areas where I see that, the clay is still a bit rough, and we want rough. We want rough. We want to give dignity to that rough. What it means that we want to show. Okay. There's marks. Want to feel them. Okay. At this point, I will also use clay finish, which is always from that same folder. Clay finish, what it does, it does what it says. Actually, it's like where it's like if we got our fingers and we're trying to smooth out the roughness of the clay or the excessive roundedness of the clay. Okay, this makes all our marks quite angular, so don't go overboard with this guy. When I see particularly round areas, I will go in so finding, okay, this alive quality of the clay. Okay, look at this, happy accidents. That's cool. I like it. I like this mark. Okay, I like this imperfection. It happens to fall in an area where the ear could have a similar kind of structure. So we study our structure to learn also when to keep our happy accidents, okay? We still haven't studied the nostrils, the structure of the nose. We still haven't studied the structure of the mouth and the structure of the eyes. So what I did, I improvised a little bit and I went, a little bit further on our journey. So don't be intimidated if you cannot keep up with these areas. It's okay to start, it's okay to now posing our work and finding the gesture with whatever stage you left before this time lapse, okay? If you can reach this kind of expression, it's all about working on that scaffolding, okay? And I just use the combination of these brushes that we've been using since the beginning, okay? So fracture, ball stylus, clay trim, clay finish, and the Ryan Kingsley knife. So nothing esoteric, okay? There's just a lot of feeling and corrections. The final idea we want to communicate is the action of our sculpture. This could also be action, okay? This straight pose could also be action, but I want to show you what I did with my initial study, and I want to show you how a very simple tilt, as you can see, look at how a bit more of a dramatic light, and in this case it's just a simple overhead light, one point, a single light, which creates this contrast between darkness, okay, and the light where the head is longing towards. And this is very important. This is another theme you're gonna always find, okay? Contrast. So dark, light, okay? You want to learn to recognize these patterns. And we want to try and do something similar with our study here. The shape of the orbital cavities of the skull, and how we laid out clay on top of them started to suggest me a little bit of bitterness and a little bit of heaviness and sadness. And so that's what I want to follow. It's kind of a trailhead I want to follow. That's the spark I want to follow. We want to hone that spark once we found it. And so we're going to try and do that. I'm going to go all the way down to the lowest subdivision level. I'm going to select a lasso mask like this. Okay. I'm going to get symmetry on. I want my symmetry now. Control click on the mesh to soften the mask a few times. Invert the mask. I press E, bring up the gizmo, and now I want to press Alt to unlock the gizmo, bring it back. We align it more or less with the origin point, the origin of the movement, okay? And we already see something, okay? We already see a change happening. With a simple tilt of the head, look at how powerful sculpture is. How powerful the suggestion of sculpture is. Okay, not my particular sculpture, of course, but this is the idea of sculpture. It is so powerful, you know, and everybody can try and do this and strive for this. So we start to feel something now, and maybe, just maybe, what if we rotate a little bit, and again, and again. And so now, we can try a quick render. So maybe I don't want this frontal view. Maybe I want center the gizmo, and I want to see him turning his head a little bit. No, I didn't soften the mask. Feel the movement, okay? Don't be stiff. You can always Control Z in this case. Okay. Now, I'll need to adjust the neck because now it's not true to the figure anymore. What if we bring this up a little bit? And bring it like this. So every time there is a compression on one side, very probably on the opposite side there's going to be an extension, tension and extension, contraction and flexion. I'm not sure I want the head to tilt down so much. Probably I need to adjust the light for this new pose, and the light is gonna be 60 or maybe 70% of your work. I'm gonna try and move it. So we got the light here, and so first of all I'm gonna turn off the fill, and I want to try and have the key light coming from the top. I don't want to have those harsh shadows below the orbital cavities, below the supraorbital bone, this area. Okay, so just so maybe now we want to be closer. We want to look at him from the bottom. I think we're close to what we want to achieve. Just want to sculpt the volumes with the light a bit better. So now we have the whole idea of the upper lip. So now we have these nice shadows. The light is better now, and we want these ideas. Maybe we can bring the light a bit more towards the right. Remember, you want to sculpt with the light. So I'm not suggesting something sad now, maybe I want to find the pose at this point is something intimate, okay? Yes. Now we see that he's looking downwards, and it looks like the eyes could be open, slightly opened or closed, and he's looking away at something. So maybe he's remembering, and this could be a cool. So I'm gonna save out this pose because I like it. There is some flexion we need to take care of, okay? Because our neck is twisting here, okay? So it shortens, flexes a bit more, shortens and flexes a bit more. And I do this because it's important for the pose, okay? So you need to try and distinguish what is going to help you with the pose and what not. This is our finally, and now you understood why I call this space finding, because it requires a hell lot of searching. But then once you find your main action, your main gesture, then the work is done. And this is what you learned with episode 2. You know, it's probably the most frustrating part of sculpture, but if you keep training yourself to love this process, okay, and to love to learn, and to love to constantly struggling, finding your shapes, okay, sculpture will never be something where you will do, you know, one big mark and everything is done. You're constantly connecting with shapes, with forms, and with ideas, and with feelings, mostly. So this is the end of episode 2. I'm really happy the series is starting to resonate with a lot of you guys. I got a lot of good feedback. If you want to support the series, please like it, subscribe, and share it with a few fellow artists who care about sculpture and art making. We're just getting started in our journey of sculpture. So stay tuned for next episode and keep sculpting.